I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Ulrik Raysse from Atrium Architects. He is the architect and founder of the company. And the presentation is named Towards a More Sustainable Environment.
Okay, there's supposed to be some numbers there, so I'll just kind of give them to you. The first one is supposed to say that Atrium Architects was created in 2012. So we have been operating for almost 8 years now. On the next one, it says that we are based in Dublin and in Copenhagen. So we opened our Dublin office like 2 days ago with a suitcase and a rent at WeWork. The third slide was supposed to say that we are 100% export. So that is quite interesting fact, that most companies, architectural companies, they start as local companies, they grow a business locally, and then when they feel that they are big enough, they start to do work abroad. So we have the complete opposite. We started to do work abroad with no home market, and we still don't have any home market, so 100% export. And the last slide says that we actually have roughly 250,000 square meters under construction right now, which is quite a lot for a young company. So these, I will not go into details, but then maybe I will just start to say, I know this is about BIM, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about why I am an architect. Because I think it is a very privileged kind of job to be able to have. When I was a kid, I slept at my grandmother's place, and it was an alcove just below the roof. And there I found out that basically a house was, of course, a place that protected you, but it's also a place that creates memories. And I think that is what I'm taking, and what gets me up in the morning is that we as architects, or the way I approach it, and through that my company approaches it, is by seeing that we as architects are creating the background and the framework for people's lives, for them getting married, divorced, getting sick, and everything in between. And I think that is kind of a huge privilege, and with that also comes a lot of responsibility. So for those of you who might know us, we have done Greenhall 2 in collaboration, or delivered locally in collaboration with Arkinova. So this was actually our first project. And back then I was like totally idealistic with BIM, and I thought this would be a great project to do in Revit, which it isn't. I mean, it was like a total complete failure. As you might have tried to do curves in Revit, it's like really complicated, and back in 2015 it was close to being impossible. I think that has evolved a little bit, but just a few words about it. I think it is located in a really nice place. The curvature of the building is basically kind of just following the spirit of the place, of Upper Street with the bend and the river form, and then the big parking that we had to respect, so that's why it's doing that movement. And then actually the design process was kind of going through a lot of iterations. I think I just looked at the folder with all the images we had, and I think we have roughly 1,225 kind of these kind of stepped renderings in there, just kind of investigating all the different options and ideas and facades and whatnot, until we came kind of to the right. I like the gold one, until we came kind of to an expression that is very close to what we have today. Even the slanting roof is part of the local area plan that was defined on the project by the municipality. So everything just really comes and stems from the site itself. I particularly like this element of the building, which is kind of the entrance, and it's like kind of this massive element you go through. As you can see it, I really like it. I like it a lot. And basically kind of the combination of a very simple geometry together with a double facade and a geothermal kind of facility to kind of power all the cooling and the heating needs of the building. And there even a little bit on the landscaping. The landscaping, I think, is something that we have been working with and a lot on all our projects, and basically we are striving against having a very natural feel to the landscaping, so it doesn't necessitate a lot of maintenance. And that is the idea that you are working and living in very ordered and controlled environments, which is a design, obviously. It's a very mineral and very kind of strict geometry. And the contrast between being able then to come out and then experience a landscape that is much more wild and much more free, I think we really like that contrast for people to be able to move through and from these different atmospheres. Another image of that there. So that was our first building. I think it was a quite ambitious first design to start working on. I think when we kind of at the end of the day kind of counted the fee versus the hours spent, we maybe worked for like €1 an hour. But it was, of course, what you do as a young startup is that you take an opportunity and make the best out of it. This is the night image. I think it's like looks like the home of Darth Vader on Earth, if he was ever to live here. So another project that we did started with a master plan, and the master plan is for S7, and this is one of the early renderings, actually basically down back from the competition. And then this is one of the built images. As you know, there is like 2 more buildings that have been built there, and a 4th one that is just being built and taken over with by Danske Bank, most of it, and I believe Telia. This is also done, and kind of Arkinova was fundamental in the delivery of the first stage and also some of the later stages. But what is quite interesting for that concept is that basically, I would say from the exterior, it is not the most exciting project. I would call it, it's like really, really simple in its design, and that's the whole idea, is to create a very strict and simple exterior. So that's an image of the early studies of the interior and how that translates into reality. And the contrast between being into that kind of very strict exterior and suddenly you're entering into a quite spectacular interior space. And so most of our projects, they have this kind of very simple approach with one very strong idea behind it. When I'm looking at a lot of that work that we have been doing, basically on the office market, I can see that a lot of the experiences and the boldness that you saw in Green Hall 2, that is now kind of being followed up on with Green Hall 3. Some of you might have noticed that there's been a construction site next to the big Barclay Tower there for a while now. It's very expressive projects, and these expressive projects, they really demand also a client that is willing to do so. And that is why you see so few of these kind of curved and bending projects in the world, is simply because that they necessitate clients who are willing to take the risk of doing these. So, okay, I can see my slides are just like completely messed up. But in principle, what I would like just to say a little bit about is that we as architects represent 40% of global CO2 emissions. So in that slide to the left, there was like some very nice graphics showing that out of those 40%, 30% is basically maintenance of buildings, and 11% is actually the materials that we're using. So with the work we're doing on the office side, we are managing really well kind of the maintenance of the buildings and the energy usages there through different types of certifications. A lot of progress has been done on the mechanicals and so on and so forth. But what is really difficult is actually to do anything about the 11% of global CO2 emissions, which is basically glass, concrete, and things like that are just enormously energy producing. And in that work, we are trying something new, which unfortunately is not a lot, but it is what we can do. And I have this profound kind of belief that some while ago it was like pretty cool to smoke. and today it's a little bit less cool. And I would see that tomorrow clients and businesses that are really kind of not doing certified buildings and not trying to push the boundaries of sustainability will somehow be seen as in the same way. There will be smokers and non-smokers. And I think that will have a huge impact on the new generations that will be tenants in a few years' time, how they view these buildings and how they view the environment that we are growing up in. I think we are, or I am, maybe a bit older than some of you, but we are definitely into a transition period. And that is coming very fast, and we can see that the interest for some of the new things that we're doing right now is really kind of picking up very fast. I'm just going to jump this slide here. So in Riga, we're doing this timber office. It's roughly 16,000 square meters of a new timber construction. So it's going to go for the new certificate called LEED Net Zero. There was LEED Platinum that most of you are probably familiar with. And it's also kind of aiming to be off-grid on the heating and the cooling, as well as producing 20% of all its energy needs. So we would love if we could be fully kind of off-grid, which was the client's kind of wish and ambition for it, but not possible currently. And then also having a well certification, which is kind of focusing on the interior of the building. So what is a timber office building? Well, I think it's most of these timber constructions you might have seen, you always see them with kind of an aluminum facade, and it's actually quite difficult to see that it is a timber building. Here we are working with a double skin facade, which allows us to have a very thin outer layer, and then we are currently designing this this double skin timber facade, which is a tricky thing to do. So that you actually from the outside really can get this feeling of a timber structure. So both from the outside and from the inside, that this timber really kind of stands there and is then also at the same time protected, so it doesn't turn gray or black or so forth with the weather, which is a beauty, but also kind of probably seen for many non-kind of people who are not working within the field of design and architecture and construction as something not so good when it turns gray or dark. Just an image of the facade itself, the studies that we're developing. We're actually developing parts of that facade with a Lithuanian company. So this is kind of the interior of a timber structure, and what is quite different from concrete structures is that you cannot kind of make holes in beams. So you have to find in good ways of actually being able to navigate all your services within a timber structure. And we kind of came up with this idea that by introducing another column, we could break the beams, and through that, this is a variation, the one that we're going with actually, so that we couldn't put up all the services, and then the services can go perpendicular to the facades, and actually kind of creating this very, very tall kind of construction. So we have approximately 3.20 meters to below the beams, and we have 360 below the slab. So it's going to be very generous in terms of environment for the employees there. And then you have a lot of columns, and when we're in concrete construction, we're just always, oh, columns, oh, I don't like it. But here it's wooden columns, and actually you're kind of almost happy, you know. You don't become a tree hugger almost, but I mean, kind of almost getting there. So then it's actually it's not such a big problem. This is the interior of the atrium, and basically we are currently working there. All dimensions are according to our engineer, so it is really kind of actually quite slim constructions, and they're actually a little bit larger than they should be in case of fire. So wood has this incredible kind of opportunity of when it is burning, it's creating this black crust around it, and that actually protects it from burning further. So you're counting the structure you need, and then you're counting some extra centimeters, then turn black. and then protects the fire actually much better than steel. So we are using this. This is a fully Revit kind of project, because contrary to concrete, when you make an arrow down the line, you cannot come with a drill and just drill through for coordinating things, because that's not how wood works. Wood is made in a factory, transported to site, and then mounted. So the importance of good coordination there is paramount, otherwise you end up in a mess. Just some images of the interiors here, working projects. Okay, I mean, my presentation has gone through something. Okay, just to wrap up, I have like approximately 4 minutes. Just another project I wanted to show you. So this is a building in Warsaw that we have been delivered for planning and detailed design. We hope that construction will start this summer. And basically what is quite interesting in this one here is basically the base. So you could say that Scandinavian high-rise is maybe about how a building meets the ground. We as human beings, we can understand between 1 to 4 floors, and then above that it becomes a little bit abstract. So I think it's very much for us what we call the 80-20 rule. So basically, also as a client, that you are focusing on to put your money in a specific place in the project, so that you can be a bit more simpler on a bigger part of the project. And that also happens to be the place where people are. So you're putting the money where most people benefit from it, and then it also makes the rest of the building being able to be a little more simple. The big steel construction is simply because it's located next to the remains of a factory that was in the Jewish ghetto, which are the last buildings actually preserved from the Second World War. And they used to be working with metal there, with steel. That's why we have such an expressive steel construction to tie into the heritage and the smaller scale of the buildings next door. This is another project we're doing in Budapest, which is interesting in the way that it also works very much with the ground floor in a little different way. It is, if I go back here, so basically again we are kind of creating a cut between what is above and what is below, so that when people come into the project, they also have a different experience. And I think that is very important when you are up in a floor plate with open offices or cellular offices and so forth, that when you come down for a break, that is not just the same facade that goes down to the ground, but it really becomes something different. It becomes a different atmosphere, so that you're switching off from what you're doing when you're working and what you're doing when you're taking a break. It's a 120-meter long facade. The project is roughly 65,000 square meters. So it has a quite interesting landscape approach. So it's a green landscape, but when it rains, the whole landscape actually becomes blue. We have, with our landscape architects, designed it in such a way that the plants that are there can tolerate to be underwater for a time being. So then we are collecting all the water from all the roof and everywhere and leading it down to this space, so that we are slowing the water from entering the sewer system, because when there is a lot of rainfall, the sewage systems are not designed anymore to take these large rainfalls due to climate change. So it's slowing down that runoff, and at the same time then kind of becoming this blue environment. So it's changing from green to blue, and in that sense kind of visualizing these some of the sustainable approaches that we have inside the project. And it also happens that it was an old waterworks, so in that sense we are kind of creating a relationship back to the water itself. So there we have, as you can see, what we call the canopy, which is this large roof. So the idea is when you're down there, you have the feeling of being in a warm, different, more friendly environment that is connected very much with nature. All of those projects are done in Revit, and we are working with Revit as well at the office. I mean, as a designer, it's really not a great program, but it is the market that is dictating the choice of programs you can have. I'm really looking forward to, in a few years' time, when there are some other players that are really going to come in to the fray and challenge that. But when you're working cross-country and with contractors and with engineers, that tend to be a focus on what platform you're operating from. And so in that sense, while it is giving a lot of freedom for us to be able to coordinate much, much better, it is also taking a little bit away of freedom of choice of what platform you want to work on. But definitely we have seen kind of huge benefits of being able to coordinate projects. And I think that is really something that I'm looking forward to, is that most companies are going to go from saying, yes, we are doing BIM, to actually kind of also being able to deliver it. And I think for some projects in some countries, we are just at the very early stages of that. So I hope you got something out of this, and then thank you very much for coming. Thank you.